The salt air stung Robert Bob Thompson's weathered face as he stood at the helm of his 20-foot Flicka sailboat, Drifter's Dream, on a crisp June morning in 2022. At 65, the retired physics teacher from Seattle had spent decades sailing Puget Sound, honing skills that would now carry him on an audacious quest. A solo circumnavigation of the globe. The Drifter's Dream, a stout Flicka 20 with a full keel and 6,000-pound displacement, was no luxury yacht. Its fiberglass hull, 24 feet overall with a bowsprit, was built for durability, not speed. With a 250-square-foot sail area and a cutter rig, it promised stability in the open ocean. Bob had chosen it for its simplicity and strength, qualities that mirrored his own resolve. For a year, Bob poured his savings and expertise into preparing the boat. He replaced the standing rigging with 5/16-inch 1x19 stainless steel wire, ensuring the mast could withstand punishing winds. The mainsail and jib, both new from North Sails, were triple-stitched for durability, with a storm jib and lightweight drifter stowed for extreme conditions. A 9.9 horsepower Yamaha outboard, capable of 50 hours at 2,000 RPM, was mounted for emergencies, its 10-gallon fuel tank tucked neatly in the lazarette. Two 100-watt solar panels fed a bank of 412-volt AGM batteries, powering a Raymarine chart plotter, an AIS transponder, and a single sideband radio for long-range communication. A water maker, producing 6 gallons of fresh water per hour, complemented a 20-gallon water tank. Safety gear included a 406 MHz EPIRB, a personal locator beacon, and an 8-foot inflatable dinghy. Every through hull was inspected, every valve greased, every seam checked. Bob left nothing to chance. His route was a classic westward circumnavigation, starting from Seattle. He'd sail down the west coast to San Diego, a 1,000-mile shakedown, then cross 2,200 miles to Hawaii. From there, he'd strike out for the Marquesas, a 4,000-mile Pacific crossing, followed by Tahiti, Fiji, and Australia. The Indian Ocean would take him to Cocos Keeling, Mauritius, and South Africa, rounding the Cape of Good Hope. A 2,000-mile Atlantic crossing to Brazil would lead to the Caribbean, the Panama Canal, and a final Pacific leg back to Seattle, 25,000 nautical miles in total. Bob studied weather patterns, poring over pilot charts and accounts from solo sailors. He joined online forums, trading tips with cruisers who'd faced the same oceans. The Pacific's vastness, the Indian Ocean's squalls, and the Atlantic's hurricane season loomed large, but Bob's meticulous planning gave him confidence. The departure from Seattle was a quiet affair. A handful of friends waved from the dock as Drifter's Dream slipped its mooring, the mainsail catching a 10-knot breeze. Bob felt a surge of exhilaration, tempered by the weight of the journey ahead. The first leg to San Diego was a gentle test, with calm seas and steady winds pushing the Flicka at 5 knots. He anchored in small harbors along the way, checking systems and adjusting sail trim. In San Diego, he hauled the boat for a final inspection, applying fresh anti-fouling paint to the hull and swapping out a worn rudder bearing. The outboard purred reliably, and the solar panels kept the batteries topped off. Satisfied, he set sail for Hawaii in August 2022. The 2,200-mile crossing to Hawaii was Bob's first true oceanic test. 5 days out, a squall hit with 30-knot winds in 10-foot seas. Bob reefed the mainsail to 40%, clipped his harness to a jackline, and hand-steered through the night. The Flicka's full keel held steady, riding the waves like a cork. Exhausted but unscathed, he emerged with newfound trust in his boat and himself. In Honolulu, he restocked provisions, rice, beans, and canned goods crammed into every locker, and repaired a chafed halyard, a reminder of the constant maintenance required. Locals welcomed him, trading fresh pineapple for stories of the sea. Bob lingered for 2 weeks, recalibrating his sextant and practicing celestial navigation, a skill he'd honed over years. The GPS was reliable, but he relished the art of fixing his position with a star sight. The 4,000-mile leg to the Marquesas was a 30-day marathon. Bob settled into a rhythm of 3-hour watches, napping in the cockpit with a timer to scan for ships. He sailed wing on wing, the mainsail to port and the jib poled out to starboard, catching 15-knot trade winds for a steady 5.5 knots, covering 130 miles a day. The watermaker hummed, though a clogged filter forced him to ration water for 2 days until he replaced the membrane. He trailed a handline, landing a mahi-mahi that fed him for days, its iridescent scales glinting in the sun. At night, bioluminescent plankton trailed the boat like a comet's tail. The isolation was profound. No land, no ships, just the hiss of waves and the creak of the rigging. The SSB radio crackled with weather updates, downloaded via a Pactor modem. A scare came when the windvane steering, an Aries model, jammed, forcing Bob to disassemble it in rolling seas. 4 hours later, with grease-stained hands, he had it working again. The Marquesas appeared as jagged green peaks on the horizon. Anchoring in Taiohae Bay, Nukuhiva, Bob bartered canned goods for mangoes and breadfruit. He spent weeks exploring, but the ocean called. In Tahiti, a torn mainsail seam required hours with a Sailrite sewing machine, a tool he'd packed for such moments. In Fiji, algae in the fuel tank clogged the Yamaha's filters. Bob flushed the tank with biocide, a messy 2-day job, and scrubbed the hull to remove barnacles, gaining half a knot. These were the realities of solo cruising, endless problem solving, from splicing lines to recalibrating electronics. Bob thrived on it, his engineer's mind at home in the chaos. By July 2023, Bob reached Cairns, Australia, after a 2,500-mile passage from Fiji. Navigating the Great Barrier Reef demanded precision, with daylight transits and constant chart plotting. He hauled Drifter's Dream for a fresh coat of anti-fouling paint and upgraded the anchor chain to 200 feet of high-tensile G4, shedding weight without sacrificing strength. In Cairns, he joined other cruisers for barbecues, swapping tips on Indian Ocean crossings. The camaraderie of the cruising community was a lifeline, easing the solitude of his journey. Bob felt alive, his dream unfolding with every mile. The Indian Ocean loomed as the next challenge, a 2,000-mile run to Cocos Keeling. 10 days out, a sudden squall brought 35-knot winds and 12-foot seas. Bob lowered the mainsail, hoisted the storm jib, and deployed a sea anchor, a parachute-like device to steady the boat. Clipped to the jackline, he monitored the helm, waking every 20 minutes to check for hazards. The Flicka bobbed through the storm, its low center of gravity a godsend. When the winds eased, Bob found a cracked bulkhead below decks. He patched it with marine epoxy, a temporary fix he'd reinforce in port. The ordeal tested his nerve, but he pressed on, driven by the dream that had carried him this far. The Indian Ocean stretched before Bob Thompson like an endless proving ground. After surviving the squall near Cocos Keeling in August 2023, he anchored in the atoll's turquoise lagoon, a brief respite. The Drifter's Dream, his 20-foot Flicka, bore the scars of 10,000 miles. Faded paint, salt-crusted lines, and a cockpit weathered by sun and spray. Bob repaired the cracked bulkhead with fiberglass cloth and epoxy, a 3-day job under the tropical sun. He inspected every inch of the rigging, replacing a frayed shroud with a spare length of 5/16-inch wire, secured with Stylock fittings. Provisioning was a challenge. The tiny Flicka's lockers held only 200 pounds of dry goods, forcing Bob to pack efficiently. Vacuum-sealed rice, beans, and dried fruit wedged beside spare parts. He traded a spare halyard for fresh coconuts, savoring the taste of land before the 2,000-mile push to Mauritius. The passage to Mauritius was a gauntlet of variable winds in Ascension Island. He crossed the Atlantic to Brazil, a 2,000-mile run. The trade winds held steady at 15 knots, pushing the Flicka at 5 knots. Bob navigated with a mix of GPS and sextant, double-checking positions with noon sights. In Recife, he restocked and repaired a chafed jib sheet, a quick fix with Dyneema line. The Caribbean leg was a sailor's dream, turquoise waters and steady breezes, but not without challenges. In Grenada, he scrubbed the hull to remove barnacles, gaining speed and recalibrated the wind vane after a loose bolt caused it to slip. The Panama Canal crossing in April 2024 was a logistical hurdle. Bob paid $2,500 in fees, hired line handlers, and navigated the Gatun locks, tying Drifter's dream to a larger yacht to save space. The 50-mile transit took 2 days, with Bob steering through 8-knot currents and dodging freighters. The final Pacific leg back to Seattle was a 5,000-mile slog. Bob faced a gale off Costa Rica, reefing the mainsail and hand steering for 12 hours. The Flicka's stability shone, but the ordeal left him drained. He rationed water when the watermaker's pump faltered, fixing it with a spare impeller. Fishing sustained him. Tuna caught on a hand line became a staple. The isolation was crushing at times, but nightly SSB radio nets with other cruisers kept him grounded, their voices a tether to the world. In December 2024, Bob sailed into Puget Sound, 25,000 miles in 30 months after leaving. Friends greeted him at the dock, their cheers mingling with the gulls' cries. The Drifter's dream was weathered but unbowed, a testament to Bob's preparation and grit. He shared his story at local yacht clubs, urging sailors to check their gear, preventers, shrouds, and lifelines, and to never skip a harness. His blog, read by thousands, inspired a new generation of dreamers. Bob's journey was proof that a small boat and a big dream could conquer the world's oceans, one careful knot at a time.